Hello and welcome to Freedom from Fear, a German New Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Ashlee Newberry.
And I'm your other host, Abigail Puccioni. Please be aware that nothing discussed here on this podcast should be taken as medical advice.
Consult your trusted professionals and your own inner knowing before making any health decisions.
Hey guys, so before we dive into the episode, we just wanted to share some really exciting news about an event that we're going to be a part of this January 25th through 26th in Austin, Texas. And it's called Paradigm Shift, a GNM Weekend. And this is truly going to be all about building GNM community and socializing with like-minded individuals who are all on this paradigm shift journey. And we're going to feature a lineup of expert speakers on a wide variety of different GNM topics. Ashlee and I are both going to be speaking at this event. And the main focus is going to be on how to actually integrate this beautiful body of knowledge into your life. We would really love to see you guys there, and we have the website linked up in the podcast description. It's paradigmshiftweekend.com. So definitely check that out for all the details, including the full speaker lineup and information on how to register. So yeah, we hope to see you guys in Austin this January.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Freedom from Fear. Today, we will be discussing the topic of practical versus perceptual resolutions. What is a resolution? What's the difference? How can you utilize one or both? When does it make sense to kind of go for a more perceptual resolution versus a practical resolution? And in a broader sense, how to get to a place of resolution, no matter what conflict you're dealing with and what symptoms that you've been struggling with. And yeah, like what to do once you know the conflict and what it's about, what's next.
Yeah, so we're going to start by talking about practical resolutions. And this is often I'm not going to say best way, but certainly usually the easiest and fastest way to resolve a conflict. So a practical resolution is when you take practical steps to change the situation that is creating the conflict. This could look like moving to a different city, breaking up with your partner or getting a new partner, moving close to someone that you're physically separated from, having a baby, quitting your job, etc. However, a practical resolution, as you can probably guess, is not always possible because a lot of times this is going to depend on not necessarily just you taking a very practical action step, but this could be dependent on someone else or an external situation. So an external situation or person that you are, let's say, relying on them, your environment needs to change, or not necessarily environment, your external reality needs to change. So whatever the conflict was about, say if it's about, I don't know, the way that your mom talks to you, right? The very practical resolution, or I would say the most obvious practical resolution would be if your mom just stopped talking to you like that, right? It became just only talk to you in a sweet, kind, caring, loving way. So that would be one example of a practical resolution. Or I guess another example of a practical resolution might be cutting off family or your mom and just not talking to her again, right? Just cutting her out of your life. So these are examples of practical resolutions. Another really good one, which I kind of mentioned, if the conflict is about losing your job, a very practical resolution is to go get a new one. But as we know, it's not always that easy. So often there's not a great practical resolution available to us, or that's not an immediate option. So that's where we introduce the concept of perceptual resolutions. And Ashlee's going to describe what this is in just a moment. But I do want to note that I think there's some controversy perhaps in the GNM world about the efficacy of perceptual resolutions. And some people can say, oh, well, for a very, practical biological conflict that has to do with survival, you need to resolve that practically. So if the conflict is about being physically separated from someone, some people in the GNM world would say you can't resolve that perceptually, but you have to resolve that practically. So you have to be physically closer to that person or something like that. But that's not always possible. And on this podcast, Ashlee and I are all about how to empower you the most to where you have access to your greatest amount of personal freedom. So this is where the concept of radical responsibility comes in and leads us to the topic of perceptual resolutions.
Yes, our favorite topic. So thank you for that description of practical resolutions. And you're right. It's not always possible to have a practical resolution. And before we move into perceptual resolution, I also think that there tends to be an element of a perceptual resolution, even within a practical resolution, because the concept of resolution in general is like when it can never happen again, or when you can laugh about it. So let's say in this instance with you need a new job. Well, if when you get that new job, that is the resolution, but there's still this kind of tendency to perpetuate whatever conflict that happened when you lost the other job, even though the new job is the resolution, if there's still a belief in your psyche and there's still this kind of underlying looking for that type of conflict, unconsciously, of course, then it could still happen again. And so that's where we'll get into this a little bit later, but that's where it can be a little muddy, a little murky with, okay, I don't think it's necessarily always one or the other. It tends to usually be a combination of both, but one side is kind of more heavily weighed depending on, what action steps you take or, change your perspective. So what is a perceptual resolution? So this is when the conflict situation doesn't necessarily change, but your perception of it does. This type of resolution is always available to you, and perceptual resolutions hold the key to unlocking radical responsibility and personal freedom. Our favorite buzzwords. We might not be able to change our external environment, but we can change the lens through which we see the world. Questioning the way in which we're interpreting reality is even allowing something to be a conflict in the first place, which again is kind of what I just said before explaining the definition, that if you're still perceiving something through a certain lens, even if there is that practical resolution, if you don't change how you're seeing things, it could still happen again. So, and what we love about perceptual resolutions is that we're not relying on external circumstances or people to help us resolve our conflicts, whatever they might be. And sometimes, especially the more primal or more earlier biological conflicts, which are more about survival, it can be hard or very, very challenging to resolve those just from the practical standpoint, because, like Abigail was saying about the separation conflict, especially with moms and babies, there is a biological need for moms and babies to be together. And it's very unbiological for them to be separated. So with kids and with animals, they do not usually have as many perceived threats or conflicts as adults do. They're more operating from I'm not going to say real conflicts, but like they're more real threats instead of perceived threats, if that makes sense. So, when you put your baby in daycare and they're having this separation conflict, they're having a rash, it's going to be hard to reason with a baby or a toddler, right? That you need to go to daycare because mom and dad have to work. And for a child or for an animal, they usually need more of a practical resolution because they're not able to understand or kind of understand logically like why something is happening. They just know and feel and perceive that like, okay, what's happening is not working, right? Mothers and babies are
Mhm.
biologically supposed to be together. Now, we're not saying if you have to put your baby in daycare that, you know, that's wrong or bad or anything like that, but paying attention to, is this working, especially with kids and animals, is going to be really helpful to actually help them resolve things.
Mm. And yeah, I think the more that I've worked with little kids, and I'm sure that you've noticed this as well, it is a very practical resolution that's often needed. However, what a lot of parents don't realize is that the small children often, let's say, mirror the conflicts of the adult. So
Mm-hmm.
while a perceptual resolution might not be available to your child, that is still available to you because your,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, energetic field, your perception of the world around you, that's sending a signal of safety to your child. You know, they're looking to you for that, let's say, emotional attunement. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you are constantly sending out those not okay, not safe vibes, or the mother is having a conflict about being separated from the child going to daycare, like, oh, I feel like a horrible mother. And oh, like I would I would bet that that is more where the conflict's coming from than actually from the psyche of the child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we won't really get into today, but that's more of let's say a sympathetic conflict where we are looking at, okay, for the child, for the pet, they're not going to be able to perceptually resolve things in the way that we can as adults. However, look at, what is the adult, how are they setting the tone?
Yeah.
So yeah, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point to bring up. And I think too, for any parents listening, I just want to say that you have more influence than you might even see or believe. And that the home and how you parent your kids is more powerful than all these outside things, them going to school, their friends, and having that safe space, that safe environment and relationship is very powerful. And that co-regulation and attunement that Abigail was saying, like nothing beats that, like there's not any of these external things you can try or supplements or all these other things, but actually being in tune with the kids that are in front of you that you're responsible for as a parent is going to be the most helpful for them and for you more than you might realize. And we talk about this in several other episodes on the podcast where we've interviewed Annie Heatley, and about her conflicts and with her kids, and then also Allie, which was the episode right before this. And so if you're a parent, check out those episodes. Those are really great for moms and dads alike for understanding, how do I use this information, with my kids. So yeah.
Yeah. I think if anything, setting the example of not looking for something outside yourself, not outsourcing your power, not outsourcing your health. If anything, that is what is going to make the biggest difference for a child. And I feel like we got really off topic with this here, but that's okay. Little rabbit trail there. But I wanted to go back to for the quote that Ashlee brought up earlier. The when you, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but a conflict is resolved when you can either laugh about it or you know that it cannot happen again. And that is from Helmut Pilhar, which was the appointed lecturer by Dr. Hammer. And I always like to remind people of that. Okay, maybe you can't be assured that it cannot happen again. You could get hit by a car again. If you're in a car wreck, that could happen again if you're going to be on the road, right? But can you get to the point where you can laugh about it? And Ashlee and I have talked a lot about this before, about just how sacred humor is to us because it's such a powerful tool. It is not
Mm-hmm.
I know before we've gotten comments about the podcast about that, oh, we're just making light of a very serious topic, or, oh, that we, laugh about someone, what they're struggling with or anything like that. And, or their fear of something like cancer or whatever. But when we are, laughing or joking or making light of something, it is not to disrespect that thing. If anything, it is our greatest way of respecting that person or this beautiful
Mm-hmm.
body of knowledge, because we understand the power of being able to take it a little more lightly, even being able to laugh at ourselves, which we do a lot. Because we're all
Daily.
still learning. We're in this process. But yes, and Helmut understood that, and Dr. Hammer understood that. So again, when we're talking about practical versus perceptual resolutions, we are kind of breaking it down like this versus this in a very theoretical way. And we kind of define them both for you. And this goes along with what Ashlee was just saying, in reality, they're very they go together often.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is what I see all the time in my own life and with clients. When you can take some tangible practical action steps, that can actually help facilitate a resolution. So I'm going to give a really clear-cut example of this. So say if someone lost their job, and that was the conflict shock moment that started an adaptation, and they were in conflict active, right? So they are trying to find a resolution to this conflict. So of course, the obvious practical resolution, the best choice that would likely resolve this is to get a new job. However, that might not be immediately available to them. So what can
Mm-hmm.
they do to take tangible, practical action steps to work towards that larger practical resolution of getting a new job, while also working on the perceptual resolution angle, which is how did they have to perceive the world around them in order for that, shocking event of finding out that they lost their job to land in their psyche in a certain way and initiate an adaptation, right? Because some people lose their job, find that out, and maybe do not experience a conflict shock from that, right? What meaning are they assigning to their job or about their career? Say if it was a self-devaluation conflict, what are they getting their value and sense of worth from the job title that they have,
Mm.
right? Was the shock about, "Oh, my parents are going to disapprove of me. This feels unsafe. The body needs to start adapting in some way." So again, we have to look at, what action steps can they do to work towards perhaps both the practical and perceptual resolution? Because when we talk a lot about just evolving as humans in our consciousness, and truly perceptual resolutions are how we evolve our
Mm-hmm.
psyche, and therefore our body, our mind, I mean, our brain, our psyche, brain, and organ levels. So yeah, that's really how we adapt and evolve as humans. And going back to the children thing, conflict shocks are not a negative thing. Children learn and build resiliency through experiencing conflicts and then resolving them and
Mm-hmm.
watching their parents model that
Yep.
also. Um, so yeah, going back to the job, losing the job example though, what are some, and this is what the kind of stuff that we would do when working with a client is we would find, okay, this is the conflict. What do you have any practical resolutions available to you? That's the first thing we'd look at. And then how can we kind of rise above this? How can we, what's the word? How can we evolve our biology? How can we move towards a perceptual resolution so that even if the same thing happened again, you're no longer eligible to experience that as a conflict shock in that
Mm-hmm.
way, or as a
Mm-hmm.
conflict in that way? So some examples that this person might do, say if it's a guy, he could, well, first of all, an element of a conflict shock is emotional isolation. So he could perhaps, hang out with a group of guys, or, talk to other people who have also lost their jobs and are in the process of looking for new jobs, because that can be a scary and isolating experience, full of different feelings and emotions and struggles. And so joining some sort of support group or communing with other people who are going through the same thing or who have already gone through the same thing and have come out, stronger on the other side. I feel like that sounds cheesy, but, he could also work on, okay, I'm going to work on myself during this time. Maybe he's doing some, starts a exercise regimen, right? Starts focusing on, getting some good nutrition, spending more time with family and friends. And, how can he work on improving his experience of what it's like to be him in every area of his life? Another practical, tangible step to move towards a practical resolution: update your resume.
Mm-hmm.
Update your LinkedIn, start actually applying for jobs, like take the action step. You're not just going to sit there, meditate all day and like, oh, I'm going to transcend this conflict. No, you actually need to take some practical steps, because not only can that help the practical resolution occur, it can also help facilitate the perceptual resolution. You're taking an action, you're getting out of your same old routine, which is
Mm-hmm.
perhaps laying in bed feeling sorry for yourself. Get up out of bed, go to a new coffee shop. I'm going to work on my resume today. I'm going to connect with other people who are going through the same thing. I'm going to go to a networking event, right? So these are some, practical steps that can help move that person towards resolution. As well as understanding, oh, I'm in conflict active right now. What are some ways I can support my body when I'm in a
Mm-hmm.
more sympathetic state? Perhaps taking some warm baths, perhaps doing some parasympathetic inducing deep breathing, perhaps doing, different self-care things. I mean, there's so many different nervous system hacks and wellness hacks that can help support you when you're in that more conflict active state. So Ashlee, anything else you want to add to that list?
Of the supporting things.
Well, yeah, just different practical steps that this, fictional example of a person that this guy could do when he's working to downgrade and eventually resolve this conflict that had to do with losing his job.
Yeah, something that can also be powerful, that's um a little bit maybe more in the perceptual realm, but still something you can do, is to write out or journal, like, what is your ideal job? Like,
Mm, yeah.
where are you working? What, if you're working in an office, what type of office? Like, what are you doing? What is your day-to-day things? How are you being treated? What's your position? And like Abigail was saying, like taking the time to kind of reevaluate, see what's working, what's not, and what's next, and how can the next thing be more fulfilling, be, better, and really use the power of your imagination to focus on what you want, which is something Abigail and I talk about a lot, on this podcast with clients, between ourselves, because that rut of using your imagination to focus on all the things that are going wrong is very easy to fall into, and that is what has kept us surviving and safe. But changing where you're focusing is going, because wherever you're looking for, you're going to find. And so using that kind of maybe break time between when you've lost a job to when you get a new job, to kind of reevaluate and revamp some things like your resume and how you're doing things, but then also to, again, shift your perception so that maybe when a new job opportunity comes along, you're even able to see it at all, because maybe it's not exactly what, the box you would have put yourself in for a new job, but maybe it's actually way more aligned than what you were doing before. And so if you give your mind and your subconscious time and space, and this is true for any resolution, like not trying to force something to happen, but giving yourself time and space to just chill out, so that a new idea, a new perspective, maybe an action step that you wouldn't have thought of because you're so focused on, I need to resolve this, staying on the hamster's wheel, but taking it a little bit slower, taking some time can actually allow the space for a new idea to come in so that you can move forward. And it might seem counterintuitive, but essentially like slowing down in order to speed up later, right? In order to go that new direction, or just to have a new perspective on what's going on in the moment so you can move forward is really powerful.
Yeah. And I thought of two other things for helping facilitate the perceptual resolution. One, reframe it. How can you see this in a different way? And I'm not talking about, toxic positivity, like, oh, just everything's sunshine and rainbows. Like, no, we can acknowledge it really sucks to lose your job. Like that's a hard thing. And this is threatening my primal brain that is based on, okay, how are we going to survive? How are we going to earn money to buy food, right? Like acknowledge the relevance of that to your primal body, right? But how can we reframe this? And kind of what Ashlee was saying, how can you see this as actually a great opportunity, right? Because say if you were stuck in a job that you weren't totally loving, or you're like, oh, well, I've maybe thought about switching careers or whatever, but we're humans. We don't love change all the time. Our brains like to, kind of stay the same. So how is this, losing the job, which yeah, it was a conflict shock, but how is that kind of perhaps the kick in the pants that you needed to propel you into something, like Ashlee said, even more aligned? So how can we turn this around and view it in a way that we're like, oh, wow, this is actually really advantageous. And I'm going to use this opportunity to move more towards what I want. Instead of just focusing on how much it sucks that you lost that, or that was taken away from you. So how to see it as an opportunity. And then, oh yeah, I was scribbling down my notes. What you seek is seeking you.
Yeah.
And I feel like that might sound a bit woo-woo to some people, but I do think it's true. When you are changing, and when I think your higher self knows when you're ready for that, little upgrade, let's say. And so I think sometimes we experience conflicts again to help us evolve. And so I think being able to see it in this more kind of a beautiful way, like look at the purpose behind what your body doing what it's doing, but then at an even higher level, I don't know if you want to use the word fate or whatever, but in the overarching kind of scheme plan of your life or whatever, how to play around with having this belief that what you seek is seeking you, even if it's not true. Okay. Would it feel better to have that belief? Would that be more advantageous than to have the belief that bad, sucky things always happen to me? So I think too, we
conflict.
Right. We want to look at beliefs. What meaning are you attaching to that job that you had, or having a certain career title, or the meaning that you're attaching to being unemployed? Is that just the worst, most shameful thing you can imagine? And this is sneaky here, because these beliefs are often coming from how we were raised, the family we grew up in. These are often inherited from our parents and grandparents and just the culture in which we were raised. And so you want to look at your beliefs. What are the beliefs that I have attached to just the general topic of career, or finances, things like that? And then look at those beliefs, the ones you're currently operating under, the ones that are perhaps providing, let's say, oxygen to keep this conflict alive and relevant. And look at, okay, how can I intentionally go about rewiring some of those beliefs? How can I look at the beliefs I have that I'm taking evidence from my life? So I'm using this losing job example to validate some of these perhaps unhelpful beliefs that I currently have. Well, how can I look for other evidence in my life to support the beliefs that I want to instill? So again, looking at those beliefs, and even looking at your values. What values are actually yours versus inherited values? What values are coming from your parents, for example? Like, the importance of having a, big, important corporate job, right?
Stable job.
I mean, I would argue that, it is important to have a way to be able to provide for yourself, of course, but what other sneaky beliefs might be attached there that it's not truly just about survival, but rather it's about status, about power, about people, more people are going to like me if I have a big job with a fancy title or, that sort of thing. So we're looking at beliefs. I find it's a lot too, like what will my parents think about me, kind of
Mm-hmm.
needing to prove yourself to family and things like that. So without getting off track, let's see, I think the last thing I was going to mention, just the power of doing something different. So this is also a really big tool for facilitating both practical and perceptual resolutions, but I would say primarily perceptual here. When you change your routine that you're doing that day, just your daily routine, even changing that up can help you see the world in a slightly different way. Learning German New Medicine can help you see the world in a different way. Anything that you do that gets you out of that rut of like the same old, especially same old thought patterns, because our very tangible actions that we take through the day actually leads to thinking a lot of the same thoughts through the day. We're very predictable creatures, to the point where, a lot of even our, like on social media and stuff, they know, like the marketing agencies, they know how to market to us because we're so predictable. Which is, yeah, I won't even get into that, but yeah, how can I do just something radically different? How can I change up my day? I mean, brushing my teeth with the opposite hand. Like for me, it would be with my left hand, or driving to work a different route. And I know for a lot of people, they're like, well, how will that help me resolve my conflict? But you would be surprised when you start trying to change the way that you're seeing the world around you. It's less about doing the right thing and more about just doing something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love your teeth brushing example. I actually use that with my clients a lot. And yeah, I'm also a right-handed person. And so doing it with my left hand, I have to think so hard. Like to brush my teeth with my left hand. I'm like, wow. And I do this with my right hand every day, and it's just on autopilot. And that's the same with our thoughts, when we're changing to a new set of beliefs or patterns or thoughts. uh it can feel like you're learning to brush your teeth with your other hand, and it can be awkward, slow, and hard because it's new, right? And that's the thing with our subconscious, is that new doesn't mean bad and different doesn't mean bad, but because we are wired for survival, and even if the patterns aren't necessarily resourceful, we've survived, we've stayed alive this long with those patterns. Changing that up, and that kind of transition to doing something different can feel awkward and weird and just difficult, but not because the new way of doing things is bad or that it's always going to be hard. I mean, think about, okay, using this brushing your teeth example, like when you were first learning to brush your teeth as a child, yeah, it was probably hard. And your parents probably had to help you because you couldn't, brush them all very well just by yourself. But as an adult, you know, uh, hopefully you're doing it by yourself, right? And like some other adult, it doesn't need to help you do it because you figured out how to successfully brush your teeth. The same is true with these patterns and with changing your perception, changing your mind, changing the lens through which you see the world. And that takes effort and time. And, but it also isn't going to feel weird and difficult forever. And seeing change in that way can be very powerful because, even doing this podcast, right? We've been doing this now for almost 11 months or 10 and a half months. And, at the beginning, there was a lot to figure out. And now we've got a system, we have things in place, we kind of know what we're doing, and we have we have a lot of systems in place that we didn't at the beginning. And so even something as, different as starting a podcast, which has been such a fun project, and, just a lot of cool opportunities to talk with new people and to share the beautiful wisdom of German New Medicine. But even doing something like that, or, starting our coaching businesses, it's like, it doesn't just happen overnight. So also giving yourself grace and patience as you are changing your perceptions and downgrading things in order to have a complete resolution, I think is really powerful, because sometimes things can happen overnight, and they do, especially with the practical resolutions. I have an interesting story on that in a second. But sometimes they don't, right? And so I had someone I was working with that had a lot of stink conflicts, a lot of sinus issues. And she was attributing a lot of it to allergies and pollen and allergy season. And, but every time we would speak and we would meet, there was a theme of this particular person at her work that was challenging, frustrating, irritating. And, in the back of my mind, I'm kind of like, okay, that's probably connected in some way. And several months ago, this other person that was, frustrating, annoying, no longer works with her now. She switched teams. And so this person is no longer on her team. So she's not dealing with this person at all anymore. Not even at all. And she shared with me her sinus issues have disappeared, overnight. I'm doing air quotes. But the thing is, what happened externally changed overnight. This irritating thing, this person that she had tried to perceptually kind of change her mind, and she has had some success, it was still kind of like, oh, this pebble in your shoe, right? This kind of constantly slightly annoying thing that is always there, that was never completely gone. And until that shifted, it was hard for her to perceptually change her mind about it, because it was just kind of lingering. And so once she changed positions and was able to not have this person on her team anymore, it was like, oh, she could breathe again, right? Not having these sinus issues anymore. And so, that's what's beautiful about practical and perceptual resolutions, is that, like we've been saying, it's usually a combination of both. And sometimes the practical is not available, but also sometimes the perceptual is not fully available too. So just giving yourself that grace and compassion on that transition on the way to resolution, because it might be different than what you think it might be.
Yeah, I love that story, because that's so obvious about the external change, and therefore it's resolved. And I've had resolutions like that where I know it was not because I perceptually changed anything. It's solely because the external situation changed. But it's always like, oh, great, I'm so relieved. But then I think, you know what? I'm still so eligible to experience that exact thing again if that were to happen. And that leaves you in a very a more vulnerable place, because your health, your well-being is very dependent on what's going on in the external. So when Susie Q has the ability to activate that conflict again for you, you're not really accessing your full personal power, right? So another helpful question that you can ask yourself when thinking about, how can I help facilitate a perceptual resolution? Because really, this isn't the kind of thing that's like, okay, I'm going to have my checklist of things I'm going to do every day to try to facilitate this perceptual resolution. Sometimes there's some action steps that you can take that are available to you. However, this is just about seeing the world differently. What would make this conflict no longer relevant to me? Who would I have to become? And what would I have to believe about myself, about others, about the world around me, in order to just not even be eligible to experience this conflict? So For example, I know that this episode is coming out just right after the election, at least here in the United States, which is a very, heated topic, of course. And I know a lot of people that one way, whatever side of the fence you're on, people are terrified for the other party to win, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
you're putting your faith and giving your power away to where your okayness is dependent on which party is in power, um, that's not a place I want to be in, right? That's not
Mm-hmm.
giving myself access to my greatest amount of personal freedom and taking control of my health. And because I know people are going to experience conflict shocks no
Yep.
matter who, when they find out, oh, so and so won the election, there's going to be a lot of people that experience a conflict shock from that are not happy because they're going to think, oh, I'm in danger. This is
Right.
because of the marketing, the fear mongering from both sides, right? It's this, oh, you're not going to be okay if the other person's in, or your freedoms are going to be taken away if this person's in, or whatever side it's on. There's so much fear mongering. And so when you're in that, you're very eligible to experience a conflict when your okayness is dependent on that. And so I just felt like that was a relevant point to bring up because some of you maybe are dealing with conflict shocks now that this will be coming out after the election. So whatever the result is, I'm sure that there are there's a lot of split energy out there, let's say, and we
Mm-hmm.
split energy, that push pull, that's, prime conflict material. So
Mm-hmm.
again, ask yourself, who would I have to become? What would I have to believe about the world around me? And this isn't even about whether the beliefs are true objectively or not, but would having that belief make me no longer eligible to experience that conflict? That would be more my I guess definition of truth is what beliefs are going to lead me closer to peace and
Mm-hmm.
resiliency and personal freedom as opposed to fear and giving my power away and outsourcing really my health. Because when you outsource your perception of the world around you to the fear mongering, to the marketing, to the noise of just culture at large, to opinions of family members, when you're giving that power away, your perception and therefore your health is in a more vulnerable state.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the election stuff because that will be interesting. Yeah, to just see people's experience. And the same is true again, not just in politics, but in all areas of life.
Mm.
Like, how can you take your power back so that you can be the one deciding what's going to work best for you and to respond more resourcefully regardless of if this new belief maybe sounds crazy or far-fetched to someone else, like if it's supporting you and again bringing you more to peace, then who cares, right? And then I know that maybe sounds mean to say it that way or something, but it's also like, practicing this new way of thinking and being and letting go of the meanings that you've given things that are happening in your life now or things that have happened in the past, but really going more towards what's going to help me the most, what's going to be the most supportive, in my relationships with my family, with my job, with my kids, with my friends, with work, and business, and just kind of letting go of, as much as possible, caring so much about what other people think, that again, that even that is outsourcing your health to these other people because you're relying on them to think that you're a good person or say that you're a good person, or whatever that kind of sticky thing is for you, and just caring 1% less about what people think of you, because that is going to help you be more resilient to having a conflict shock at all in the first place, and then maybe not having to resolve something because you realize that this other person saying XYZ about you, or, on social media or about your podcast, really has nothing to do with you, because it's not about you. It's about them, and it's about their perception of the world. And maybe what you're sharing, or even on this podcast, right? Like what we're sharing is quite triggering for so many people, because it's questioning and kind of poking holes in what we've been programmed to believe about our health, about our bodies, about our perceptions and beliefs. And it's not comfortable sometimes to be in that place where you're hearing something, and it can be hard to not feel triggered, right? But when that happens, can you see that as an opportunity for, okay, this is coming up for me to look at, right? This is coming up to be cleared. One of my friends used to say that all the time. And I always thought it was a little dorky, but I'm seeing the relevance, more and more. And to just see things when they happen in life as opportunities to possibly do something different,
Yeah. And guys, this is triggering for us too. Yeah, this is not, we're not just saying that this is triggering for people listening, but including us doing this work, if you will, is really a lifelong process. And someone recently asked me how I would define health. And I thought about it, and honestly, my answer is health equals perception. Health,
Mm,
foundationally, it is your perception of the world around you. That is what health is. So again, and that can be using that for your benefit, moving more towards what you want in life, or that can lead to some more negative health outcomes, or rather not even negative. It's not negative or positive. It just is. It could lead to, if you have a conflict shock, and then it's a larger adaptation, that can lead to uncomfortable symptoms. It's cause and effect. It's just our
mhm,
biology. There is no right or wrong. We've talked about this before. It's just how you're seeing the world around you. That is health. That
mhm,
is what determines everything about your physiology. So, and again, there's, a few exceptions: malnutrition, injury, poisoning. We have wait, yeah, did I say that right? Malnutrition, injury, and poisoning. We have a whole episode on that. But other than those three exceptions, everything in your body is responding to how you're viewing the world around you. And so I know
mhm,
that this can be frustrating for some people, because a common question is, what do I do? I hear this a lot. I tried changing my perception and it didn't work. I did all my affirmations every day. I recited affirmations for 30 minutes a day and it didn't work. So I tried, that I hear that sort of thing a lot. And that's coming from a very, like I resonate with, and I so feel you on how difficult that can be and how discouraging it can be when you're like, I feel like I'm trying to do everything so perfectly. I'm trying to shift my perception. And usually what I say to clients that are in that space is, stop trying. Stop
mhm,
learning about GNM for a while. Stop trying to find the conflict. Do something radically different. Disrupt the pattern. Let's get you out of this rut. And I wanted to give an example, which I know Ashlee's very familiar with, because we talked about this, and this was a recent one for me, and this was really hard. So my dogs are my whole world. They're my babies. I call them my best friends. Uh, they are, yeah, they're everything to me. Probably to the point where it's not maybe the healthiest relationship with my dogs, because they are like my whole world. So I experienced one of my dogs got out of the car before the leash could get on him. And anyway, he almost got hit by a car. And in that moment, it was just my body starts adapting, right? That was a conflict shock moment. And the way that my psyche perceived that was a separation conflict. And my hair started falling out soon after. So I was going through a few weeks of having, I would say almost like more than a month of hair loss, just which is
mhm,
the conflict active symptom of a separation conflict affecting the scalp. And why the scalp, you ask? And from clients I've worked with, people I've talked to, friends I've talked to, other colleagues, what I've figured out about hair loss is that it's often a separation conflict in terms of scratching your head, trying to figure out how to prevent the pain of the separation, how to prevent the potential separation. Because, my dog didn't die. He was not hit by the car, but there was that fear. So every time I
Mm-hmm.
saw my dogs, I know that seeing my dogs was a track for me because every time I saw them, it was, I need to go give them a hug and squeeze them because what if they get hit by a car today? What
Mm-hmm.
is the last day I have with them? Just really morbid, intrusive thoughts, seeing images of them getting hit by a car and their, little furry bodies are smushed and flattened and blood and guts everywhere. Like that's what would the image that was constantly
Mm.
in my head. And it was this hyper vigilance of always gotta have the leash on him, because they could get hit by a car, right? It was just this, obsession really with how do I keep my dog safe? And so, Ashlee and I talked a lot about this. And of course, this felt very impossible to resolve. I'm like, how do I perceptually resolve this or even practically resolve this? Um, because I can't know that it won't happen again. They
Right.
could get out and get hit by a car. I cannot fully prevent that. And the conflict was not actually about them getting hit by a car, right? It was about the fear of
Mm-hmm.
them getting hit, or rather just potential separation. And then there's this knowledge that they are going to die one day. I know that most likely I will outlive my dogs. And that is a really gutting thought about like I actually don't know, and talk about my primal survival brain. I don't know if I would survive that. I don't know if I would want to survive that, to be quite honest. That's how intense this was for me. That's how much I love my dogs. I'm obsessed with my dogs. And I realized I had this moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, my dogs are my best friends. Like my dogs are my whole world. What if the perceptual resolution is not actually trying to target this specific scenario, but rather, how can I fill my life so full of things that I do want, of other good things? How can I'm a real homebody. I don't
Yeah.
always love big social events or just even I'm more likely to just want to stay home. I like staying home. It's my comfort zone with my dogs, right? I don't want to leave my dogs for too long. I get a little depressed about it. So again, how can I increase other like social things? How, I'm like, okay, I need to plan meetups with more friends. I need to, spend more time cultivating in-person friendships, get out of the house. I need to, focus on my relationship with my husband and moving more towards what I want, growing my business, my serving my clients, right? Like, how can I focus on I started a new hobby. How can I add more good things in my life to make this bad thing shrink in size and
Mm.
comparison, if that makes sense. I mean, and by bad thing,
Yeah.
I mean the conflict, right? How can I make that smaller and downgrade it so that or just because so I'm making that smaller and downgrading that through expansion in other areas of my life. And I think that that's something that a lot of people forget is an option that's available to them is instead of focusing so intensely on the conflict, how can we kind of, okay, stop thinking about that for a while, stop trying to solve it, stop trying to like, because for a while I'm like, I got to perceptually resolve this. And then there was self-evaluation because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I do this professionally, like I help people resolving their conflicts. Why
And yet
can't
I
I
can't
resolve
find it.
mine?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was so demoralizing, And so anyway, I'm happy to report that as of, I would say about 2 or 3 weeks ago, my hair has stopped falling out. So that's really exciting. But guess what? Other things I did. I'm also like really kind of ashamed to admit this, but I knew that changing my shampoo or doing a hair oil or whatever, I knew that that's like not going to stop the hair from falling out. Okay. I know that that's not going to stop the program. However, my hair that was drastically thinning rapidly, that was very distressing. So, how can I use a shampoo that has, I don't know, like biotin in it to make my hair at least feel thicker
Mm-hmm.
so that I'm not layering on top of that conflict by by, seeing the hair falling out so much, how can I stop brushing my hair so much so I'm not seeing it fall out? How can I limit the psychological distress? And I, use the hair oil and massaged my hair. And I would, kind of say more like positive affirmations during this time. And I really got to the point where I had to chill out about the hair falling out. Like, this isn't a big deal. It will grow back. This is my body's just adapting. It's responding to something really scary that happened. And so that actually, I really do think that helped. Not the actual oil or the actual shampoo, because, I really don't think that does much. But, if it can help your hair feel softer, less tangly or whatever, like that can actually help while you're working on, doing everything to get to the root of the problem. So I hope that was a helpful story.
Yeah, no. And you actually shared more right now than I knew during it. So yeah. And I think what's really cool about that story and just about how we as coaches ourselves work on this stuff is that you can use other things to support yourself, but it's really always about the relationship to the thing than the thing itself. And that's why, the shampoo and the hair oil or anything somebody's listening to this episode that you're doing to help you, that's why it can be helpful, is because you feel like it is helping, right? And in our relationship to the thing is really powerful, and more so than we might even give it credit for. And I wanted to share an example of where perceptual resolution was not enough. So I've been working with this woman with the KCT conflict. We did another episode on that. I can't remember the episode number, so if you remember, you can say it, Abigail. But you already know it.
No.
Oh,
sorry. Are you talking about the KCT episode?
yes.
Oh, with Nellie. Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you in a minute.
So anyway, I've been working with this woman with the KCT conflict. She's had it for a long time, since her teens. And she doesn't live with her family and has moved around a couple times. And we've worked on a lot of this perceptual resolution and being a part of the communities that she's in, and not trying to be someone that she's not, but just being herself and allowing that to be, how she finds her tribe in whatever community that she's in, and to feel this sense of belonging and belonging to community, to a tribe. And yet the holding on to water, this abandonment conflict, is still pretty active for her, even though she's done a lot of things to shift that and to work through that. And recently she decided to take a bigger action step and actually move back to be with family. And so that's where, in this case, even though she's taken all of these perceptual steps and practical things in her life to, eating better, moving more, like just doing more things with community, that being close to family, and especially with this program, it's an older biological program, more connected to survival than some of these more, like even separation conflict is more about social connection with other humans, usually, or dogs, other beings. and so deciding to move and to be closer with family has already made such a big difference for her. And it's interesting because, sometimes you really need that practical resolution, and sometimes you really need the perceptual, and sometimes you need both. So in this case with this woman, she's not moving back tomorrow, right? And so in the meantime of when she's actually moving back, needing to have more of a perception shift, and also having a specific timeline of, okay, this is when this decision is happening, so that she's not you know kind of hemming and hawing over it, has made a really big difference. And um and that's where that practical resolution was really needed. And so that might be true for you if you're listening, with something like KCT, or something that's an older brain program, that you might need more of that physical practical resolution. And are you willing to change your life and do something different in order to have that resolution? Because doing a big change like that, is not the easiest, but it's also like, I think for myself personally, like, doing the thing that's actually going to work is worth it, even if it's going to be a pain in the butt to actually do. Like, it's worth it, and paying attention to myself and the clients I'm working with to see, like, what is working and what's not, and how can we go more towards what's working, regardless of what that is, because that's going to look different from person to person. And yeah, just paying attention to that,
And also a helpful tidbit to support those who are perhaps struggling with resolving a conflict in their life and feel really discouraged. How can you take the focus off of resolving and just think about downgrading? How can I downgrade this 1%? How can I change how I'm viewing the world around me, or take a practical action step so that this is just 1% less intense, you know? And also, instead of resolving the one, downgrade, or just think about how you can support your body when you're in an active conflict or hanging healing. Okay, I might not be able to resolve this right now, but is there a band-aid fix available to me that can at least help me chill out about the symptom, perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
That's an option too. Or can I avoid stepping on a track? I might not have the conflict resolved, but I can cut this thing. Say if the track is a specific person, well, maybe just cut that person out of your life for a little while. Or if the track is bananas, okay, stop eating bananas for a while, right? How can we approach this in a very no big deal kind of attitude, kind of approach,
Mm-hmm.
no big deal. Let's chill out about it. How can I potentially even utilize medical intervention if needed? Instead of like, I need to resolve this right now so that I can avoid going to the doctor, like how can we even chill out about potential band-aid fixes, whether holistic or conventional or anything like that? How can we best support ourselves and move towards resolution in a way that is lighthearted, playful, easeful, that feels good, that feels like we're moving more towards the direction of our ideal life, improving what it's like to be us in every area of our life? That's, I guess, kind of a quote from Dr. Melissa Sell. I know she's worked with Ashlee and I, and she's great. And she said that before, how can you improve the experience of what it's like to be you in every area of your life? So yeah, I hope that that's helpful. Ashlee, is there anything you want to, any closing thoughts?
I just wanted to quickly say that episode 17 was our KCT episode. Thanks for looking that up.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, having a lighthearted approach, and focusing on what are the things I can do, and how can I support myself, is going to be helpful, whether that gets you to a full resolution or downgrading. Like it's all good, right? And you might need some help. You might need an outside perspective, from another GNM buddy or a coach, or, listening to one of our other episodes on the podcast. And so also not putting so much pressure on just yourself as an individual that, oh, I have to figure this out or else.
Yes.
because that doesn't tend to work. Abigail and I have experienced this a lot, and just in our own friendship. And it can be really helpful to have that outside perspective, because when you're in it, it can be challenging. So, yeah.
And real quick, I also wanted to mention another episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to hear kind of continuation of this topic, we have episode 9 with Stephen Ravenstog it's called Responding Resourcefully. And this is really a lot about, resolving conflicts, I would say, and downgrading, and how to shift perception, how to take back your personal power, how to cultivate a more resilient mindset, by deepening an awareness and using that to build a stronger foundation for being more resilient, so that when you do experience a conflict shock, perhaps it's less intense, or you're able to resolve or downgrade faster, or the conflict shock is not either not as intense, or perhaps you don't even experience one at all in a situation that you otherwise would have. So that's a really great adjacent episode if you would like to expand on this. So yeah, thank you guys for listening.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Jinx.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. We appreciate you being here.
If you would like some additional support in navigating your health symptoms, we both provide coaching services from a German New Medicine perspective.
Our Instagram handles and personal websites are linked in the podcast description.